third Toronto. Look at it. This isn't some party time. Leafs win 6-5 in overtime.
Hi everyone, Sammy Flair here, and welcome back to Bolt Action, the series that will inevitably be the cause of many future conversations with my therapist. And before you ask, no, I don't want to talk about the Toronto game or the Chicago game. Who am I kidding? We're going to get there anyway, so let's just jump right in. The Tampa Bay Lightning kicked off this week with a 6-4 victory in Ottawa over the Senators. They then traveled to Toronto, where they lost, again, in overtime, again, 6-5. The very next night, on the second half of a back-to-back, they go to Montreal and come away with a victory 5-3 before returning to Tampa and losing to the Chicago Blackhawks 5-3. So for this week, they come away with 5 points over the course of 4 games and managed to keep up that point per game pace in the standings. Towards the end of last week's video, I mentioned 2 things that were concerning for me as we were moving forward in the season. Thankfully, one of those things got resolved and the other very much did not. The one that did get resolved, the Lightning had not won a game on the road this season. Again, that's done and over with. They won in Ottawa, they won in Montreal. That monkey is off their back. However, the second piece of that, the part that has yet to be resolved, is the Lightning have still not won a game in overtime this season by virtue of their loss to the Toronto Maple Leafs again in overtime again. I swear, it's like somebody accidentally pushed the repeat button instead of the shuffle button, and I'm getting really sick of hearing the same song over and over again. You make my dreams come true. Ooh, ooh. Yes, I know that's not their goal song anymore. Let me feel my feelings, dang it. But the worst part about those now 4 overtime losses isn't necessarily the losses themselves, because after all, you still get a point in the standings, so it's not a total loss there. But it's that they still have not won a face-off in overtime, and that's a problem. But even more so, they still haven't taken a shot on goal during overtime. The difference is now that instead of being outshot 12-0 in 3 overtime losses, they're now being outshot 14-0 in 4 overtime losses. But with the rate and the efficiency that the Lightning are both shooting and scoring this season, it is completely unacceptable that they cannot even get a shot on goal during an overtime period. It's 3-on-3. You got a really good chance of scoring. Do you realize that the Tampa Bay Lightning are the 3rd best team both in goals for and in shooting percentage this season? They're only behind the LA Kings and the Vancouver Canucks. So for those 4 overtime losses, if you actually, win a faceoff every once in a while and you shoot the puck, let's say you get 2 of those wins, you get an extra 2 points in the standings. It's not going to make a ton of difference in the standings, right? I mean, Boston is way out in front, 23 points through 13 games, but the other 7 teams in the Atlantic are within 5 points of each other. So, if the playoffs started today, the Lightning would be the road team in a series against Detroit. But if you get those 2 points back, now all of a sudden you are the home team in a series against Detroit. But what it does for you is give you that little extra bit of breathing room, little extra bit of confidence to know that even if things do get a little bit out of hand and you let some teams back in late and they tie up the game, or if you're the team that is trying to claw, scratch, and bite your way back into a game late and you tie it up towards the end of the game and you head to OT, you go in with the confidence knowing that you can win that game. But what we do have to work with right now are some trends, a few of them that I want to talk about in this video, and thankfully, most of them are trending upwards, meaning they are becoming less problematic as time goes on, but we do still need to talk about them right now. First of all, I know that I have made a big fuss about the defensive play this season, and rightfully so. Not only are the Tampa Bay Lightning a top 3 team in scoring, they are also a bottom 3 team in goals against this season. They're actually tied for 3rd worst in goals against this season behind 2 teams that you would absolutely expect and one that you may not. The one that you may not being the Minnesota Wild, and the 2 that you absolutely would being the dumpster fire seasons that the San Jose Sharks and the Edmonton Oilers are having right now. And when you have let in that many goals at this point in the season, you know that something is askew. a lot of people would be looking at this team and saying, oh, it clearly must be Jonas Johansson and Matt Tompkins. After all, the backups are running the show in goal for the Lightning. Just wait till Andrei Vasilevskiy comes back and that ship is going to be righted. Now, this season, I have been an apologist for both Johansson and Tompkins. I think the defense has been playing incredibly poorly in front of both of these guys, but especially during this past week, I think the line is getting a lot blurrier between goals that are being let in because the defense is playing poorly and goals that are being let in because, well, they're backup goalies. This one over here, I expect this to happen. I expect that Jonas Johansson, a career backup, is going to let in more goals than Andrei Vasilevskiy. That makes sense to me. I expect that Matt Tompkins, who has only played 2 games in his NHL career, is going to let in more goals than Jonas Johansson. This one over here, though, this is the big one. This is the one that needs to be fixed. The defense needs to play so much better in front of these 2 goaltenders, not only to set a precedent for the rest of the season and to just be, defensively responsible, but also to just take care of your goalie, man. During the broadcast of the Ottawa game, it came up in conversation that the Lightning had made a switch this season from generally being a man defense style of hockey to a zone defense style of hockey. And that actually makes sense when you start to think about it. The defensive pieces that the Lightning have had for the last, let's say, 4 to 5 years or so, they have been very good in man-to-man situations. But as those defensemen get older or they get slower or they just leave the team altogether, while the rest of the league gets younger and faster and more talented, you can sense that there's going to be some dissonance there. So maybe making the change to a zone defense is actually helpful to these guys. And especially when you play in a division that has not only some stud skaters, some stud forwards, some absolute superstar goal scorers, but they share a line with also superstar goal scorers. You got to make some tough decisions. Victor Hedman, I trust him as a defenseman. I think he makes good decisions. I think he is responsible with his positioning. But when you're sending him up against, let's say, Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner, which one do you want him to stick on? Or is it going to be wiser for you to try to say, all right, let's put him in a zone and just hedge our bets that he's going to take care of business there? If all of the Lightning defensemen were of the caliber that Victor Hedman is, it's a different conversation that I feel like we're having. But they're not. Between Hedman and Sergachev, I think those are your 2 most talented defensemen to help mitigate those scoring chances. But the other 4 guys and the reserves past that, that's a tough call. So going to a zone defense makes sense to me. In theory, it makes sense to me. But I think the unintended consequence of that is the indecision that comes along with it. You have to trust that these guys are going to make the right decisions in the moment for when to drop coverage on one player and stick to a specific zone, or move to cover another player who is crossing into their zone. And as part of the growing pains right now, they're not doing that. And it's not just the defensemen that are at fault here. I saw Nikita Kucherov in the game against Chicago drop coverage against, I think it was Philip Kurashev in a crucial moment that led to a Connor Bedard goal. So with keeping that in mind, it makes more sense to me why the team is struggling defensively. It's a style that they have really not played any time in their recent history, and they're having to adjust to it. They're having to adjust to it on the fly, and it's exposing certain members of the team who are less defensively responsible, or they're not great at decision-making in the defensive zone. I'm not advocating that the Lightning should just drop it and immediately switch back to a man defense style in their own zone. Just because it's not working doesn't mean that it won't work. They're going to have growing pains. It's a learning process. It helps me understand some of the defensive struggles right now, and I think it will pay off further on down the road. It's just very frustrating to watch right now. And while that certainly does account for some of the goals against, for some of the odd man rushes, it accounts for a few things. I think there's one bigger thing in play here that needs to get fixed immediately. If you've been keeping up with me this season, then you know that I've been harping on turnovers. They are a tremendous problem and it needs to be fixed. So imagine my surprise when I start to dig into the data a little bit and find out that the Lightning are somehow 6th best in turnovers, basically meaning there are only 5 other teams in the league who give away the puck less than the Lightning do. But the number of giveaways doesn't tell the entire story, because while they have limited those giveaways through the first 14 games, when they are giving it away, It is costly. As far as I can tell, there is no statistic that is publicly available for giveaways that lead directly to opponent goals. But if there was, and I could see it, I would be willing to bet that the Lightning are one of the worst teams in the league for that. Just in the Chicago game alone, 3 giveaways led directly to Blackhawks goals. That is somewhat understandable if you're giving away the puck to a team that is scoring a lot of goals this season. If you're doing that against Vegas, if you're doing that against Detroit this year, or LA, or Vancouver, a team that is scoring a lot of goals, even Toronto, that makes sense to me. But when it happens against a team that is actually bottom 5 in scoring in the Chicago Blackhawks, that is a tremendous problem. And me as a fan sitting at home and watching these games on TV, there's only so much that I can speculate as to why these turnovers are happening. I don't know if it's poor decision making, if they are getting distracted, if they're attempting to be a hero and trying to do something for the highlight reel. I just know that it continues happening like this. Calvin DeHaan at the red line attempting to squeeze a pass between 2 Chicago Blackhawks at this point. Calvin DeHaan has 3 options that are more preferable to the one that he made right here. You have Nick Perbix to your right. You can just dish it off to him and continue the offensive charge. It's a lower percentage, but you also have Brandon Hagel on the right side, on the near side boards over here, and you're not going to pass the puck off to Braden Point on your left, but you can dump it into the boards and at least go and chase it. All 3 of those would be preferred to him trying to squeeze the puck to Valtteri Merila, and it ends up being a 2-on-1 the other direction. Connor Bedard to Tyler Johnson, back of the net. And this graphic shown at the beginning of the second period of the Chicago game summarizes my point masterfully. In the first period of that game, a period where the Chicago Blackhawks outscored the Lightning 4-2, the slot shots were pretty close, the high danger chances were pretty close, the turnover chances were definitely in favor of the Blackhawks, but the offensive zone possession time was 3 minutes and 7 seconds for the Lightning versus 47 seconds for Chicago. And in 47 seconds of offensive zone possession, they scored 4 goals. 4. So when I say turnovers are limited, but they are costly, that's just an example of what I mean. While I think that it's a problem that is more unique to this season and to this defensive core specifically, the Lightning have slowly been letting in more and more goals against per game over the course of the last 4 seasons. In the 2020 season, that's the 56 game shortened season, the Lightning were averaging 2.59 goals against per game. The season after that, it crept up a little bit to 2.78. Last season, it finally got over 3 goals at 3.07, and through the first 14 games of this season, that number is at 3.57. Now, while I expect that number to come down, especially after Andrei Vasilevskiy returns, it's a little troubling that the trend is allowing more and more goals. But to me, it seems like the response from the team hasn't been to fix things on the defensive side of the puck. It's been to try and jump out to an enormous lead in the first period and just kind of hope that they can hold that lead. Just this week alone, the Lightning had a 4-goal lead against Ottawa, a 3-goal lead against Toronto and Montreal, and all 3 of those games ended up being decided by 2 goals or fewer. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of a friend of mine who I play golf with. He has a nasty slice on every single shot that he takes. It's not just his driver or his woods or his irons. It's every single club that he hits. He has a nasty slice to the point where it's probably going 20 to 30 to 40 yards to the right every single shot. Now, a good golf instructor will tell you, hey, here are the things you need to do to correct that. There's something to do with your hands and your weight distribution as you're coming through the shot and your hips. There's a lot of mechanics that go into fixing that bad of a slice. But the Lightning are like my friend who decided, I don't want to fix anything. I'm just going to aim 30 yards to the left and then hope it goes in the middle. And me as a fan, as a content creator who is slowly losing her mind because these things aren't getting fixed, I think I'd rather you just fix the problem rather than mask the problem. Like I said, I feel like most of these trends are headed in the right direction. I think the issues are going to iron themselves out over the course of the season. Yeah, you're going to go through some growing pains and you got to figure things out from a personnel standpoint and figuring out how to play better defense and make smarter decisions with the puck. And when you get Vasilevskiy back, that's going to be a huge asset to the team in the long run. But I don't think it's worth panicking over right now. After all, if the season ended today, the Lightning would be in the playoffs. I'm not terribly confident about their chances, but they would at least be in the playoffs. The old saying goes that the NHL season, it's 82 games. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. I just wish that the Lightning would not stop every 100 feet to tie their shoes. A couple other quick hits I want to mention before wrapping up this video. Zach Bogosian traded to the Minnesota Wild for a 7th round pick in the 2025 NHL draft. Look, Zach Bogosian, he's a bit of a favorite of mine, both on the ice and off. He won the Stanley Cup during the 1920 season. I love the cooking series he did with the Lightning social media team. That was a lot of fun to watch. But after 16 years in the league at 33 years old, you get the sense that he's not the same defenseman that he used to be. He's probably towards the tail end of his career. Julien Brisebois saw an opportunity to get something for that contract. And let's be honest, Zach Bogosian was going to have a hard time carving out a space for himself in this defensive core, at least for the long term. So I hate it, but I understand why it had to happen. I wish Zach Bogosian nothing but the best. On the offensive side of the puck, Brayden Point has 8 points in his last 4 games, 4 goals, 4 assists. He is heating up at the right time, and he is currently sitting at 18 points through the first 14 games. But let us not overlook Nikita Kucherov, who at the time of recording this is 2nd in league scoring, only 1 point behind Elias Pettersson, and he's 2 goals behind the league lead in goals. Austin Matthews has 13. Nikita Kucherov has 11. Both of these guys are going to cool down eventually. I know that you can't keep up this pace forever, but let's enjoy riding that high while we can. But with Kucherov specifically, look, it's no secret that Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid, they haven't had the greatest start to this season. I don't know if names like Elias Pettersson can continue on this scoring pace right now. It's not that much of a stretch to say that Kucherov might be in the mix, and he might actually win the league title in points, maybe goals too. We're gonna have to track this, but he certainly looks like he can do it at this point. I also need to point out on the offensive side of the puck that the Lightning are one of 2 teams that have 5 players averaging a point per game at this point in the season. Nikita Kucherov, Brayden Point, Victor Hedman, Brandon Hagel, Steven Stamkos. The other team, interestingly enough, is Vancouver. If trends keep on getting better and you have 5 players averaging a point per game and you manage to fix the defense and you get Andrei Vasilevskiy back, the Lightning could be primed for a big time surge starting, I mean, as soon as Vasi comes back, but definitely on January 1 and beyond. I think they're going to be primed to do some big things. Lastly, got to give another shout out to Matt Tompkins. Got his first NHL win in his 2nd NHL game. He beat the Montreal Canadiens in that 5-3 victory. Huge congratulations to him. I hope that even after Vasilevskiy comes back, that is not the last that we see of Matt Tompkins. What an incredible story. What a great arc for him. I hope he got to live it up in the moment, and I hope that, it leads to bigger and better things for him. Let's take a quick look ahead at the games we'll be covering in next week's video. The Lightning have a Saturday rematch against the Carolina Hurricanes, who they shut out 3-0 last month. They follow that up with a 2-game road trip, headed first to St. Louis on the 14th and then to Chicago on the 16th, looking no doubt for some revenge for that very ugly 5-3 loss at home. And before I go, I posted that video of my Twitch stream where I read through comments of the Tampa Bay Lightning and their theme night social media posts. It was a lot of fun to do, and it got some great reaction from the Twitch chat, and people I've showed it to so far have seemed to enjoy it. So if you want to go watch that, I'll put the card up here or wherever it happens to appear on the screen. It's going to be on the screen somewhere right now. That is going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for giving me just a little bit of your time. I have really been enjoying making these videos. I hope that you have been enjoying watching them. I'm glad you're along for the ride. But until I see you again, remember, go Bolts, and don't spend 5 nights at Dangles. It's a very screamy place.